Are you looking for an experience that will grow your teenagers' faith, increase their leadership skills, and teach them the discernment to engage with the world all around them, all while taking them on the adventure of a lifetime? I mean, who isn't looking for that? If your teenager loves fun, adventure, and wants to grow in their faith and leadership this summer, then send them to Excel's Summer Leadership Camp. Excel's Summer Leadership Camp is a 12-day experience for passionate young leaders looking to discover God's truth, to discern wisely, and live wholeheartedly. Your teenager will embark on a transformative journey in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where they'll build lasting friendships in the context of community, embark on thrilling adventures like camping, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and they will receive expert training and certifications in categories like CPR and wilderness first aid. Each aspect of the camp is woven together to help them learn to discover truth, to discern wisely, and take godly action in the context of real-life situations. To learn more or begin an application, go to theexcelcamp.org. That's theexcelcamp.org. Hurry, because summer is just around the corner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm so excited to join you today as we bring a brand new conversation, helping people reclaim the balance of faith and life. And today's featured conversation is with Dillon Smith. Dillon is the content manager for Carey Nieuwhof, who runs Nieuwhof Communications, and as a longtime preacher, he's been a virtual mentor for me for years. I love his stuff, and so getting to talk to Dillon was an absolute treat. What I learned is that Dillon is a young leader who's got such an important message to share. I think you're going to love this conversation. He talks about what it means to lean into your God calling when you're not sure how you're going to get there. He gets really vulnerable about what he does after losing his father at such a young age, and he shares about how the church stepped up and filled in the gaps for him. It is such a good conversation. If you like it, if you like what you hear, there's always something you can do. Tell us about it at TWMilt. You can also share this episode. Such a huge compliment. We always appreciate it when you share, leave ratings or reviews. We want to hear from you. That's the most important thing. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Dillon Smith. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm excited to bring you today's featured conversation with Dillon Smith. Dillon, how the heck are you, man?
Man, I'm good. Excited to be here.
Now, Dillon, you have an interesting job, and this is probably a great place to get started. You're the content manager for Nieuwhof Communications, Carey Nieuwhof, who, if you're in the Christian circles, I'm sure you've read, listened to, or been a part of his stuff. What exactly does a content manager do, and how do you get into a position like that?
So, one, I got to give a lot of credit. God has just had a lot of favor on my life. So there isn't like a formula to end up working for Carey Nieuwhof, especially when you're from Nebraska, live in Nebraska, and have never been to Canada before in your life. But
yeah, you guys couldn't be really any farther apart than you are right now, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. He's on a plane right now, so he might be flying over me. But besides that, we're not that close to each other pretty much ever. So content manager wise, what I do for him now is I do a lot of writing. I help manage our website, and we have a lot of courses. We have a lot of like a blog that is one of the more widely read leadership blogs out there for Christian leadership. And we have a podcast, and I kind of help run all of that on the website and how to organize that, how to structure that. What's the best way that we can serve our audience today with that? So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. It's a lot of writing, and I love that. But it's definitely, it leaves you a different kind of tired at the end of the day.
Yeah, so what I do. I mean, yeah, what does that look like to produce that much content? I mean, Carey's kind of known for being a content machine, and I've read some of your stuff, and it seems like you're following in that same kind of vein. How do you manage to produce that much content?
So for Carey, he is a content machine. I have never met anyone that can write and think as much as he does. Like, not only does he produce multiple blog posts a week, but they're like really well thought out, and that like they're new ideas that are game changing. And I've asked him about that, and his answer is, I think it's favor. I just think that God has provided me with extra knowledge and extra like the ability to write more. And he's like, yeah, it's not up to me. It's up to God. So that's really cool. One, hearing him say that. But I mean, so he also has this course called The High Impact Leader, and he's writing a book on some of the content in that course now.
I've taken it. It's a great course.
It's amazing. So you know what I'm talking about when I say the different energy zones throughout the day.
Sure.
So right now I'm relatively new to being a content manager. I'm within the first 6 months. So I'm still learning, but one thing that I've really had to maximize is, okay, 8 to 10 is like I can pump out content zone. So what are the things that I need to be writing right now? And what are the things that I need to be like really thinking through on a deep level and making sure to keep those in my high energy zones. So that's been key for me. I know that's key for Carrie. On his calendar, we just block off the mornings as writing time, and we don't really let any meetings get in there. So that helps. But yeah.
So for you now, you're a relatively young man, right? You're in your early 20s.
Yeah, I'm 21. So
21, right? So
yeah,
I mean, 21, and you're writing content for thousands of Christian leaders all over the United States, which that's pretty amazing. How do you stay connected to God in all of that? And I heard you say that the reason you got here is because God's favor. So I kind of feel like those two things might be connected. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story and how you stay connected to God as you're producing what you hope is godly content.
So man, I mean, everyone feels that tension to, like, you want to be working, you want to go, you want to thrive, you want to go and do all the time. But a natural part of your relationship with God is just slowing down, and it's being with him. And that was something that I was really good at before I worked for Carrie. So a bit of my background, I grew up in Nebraska, and I went to this Bible college called Nebraska Christian College. And it's this place, it's in the middle of a cornfield outside of Omaha, which Omaha is the biggest city in Omaha. So we're still like close to the city and we have access to all the city things, but it is just off in the middle of nowhere, like when you're on the campus. And small school, and one of the values there is working with pastors the entire time you're getting your degree. So you work under, you always have a mentor, you always have a church that you're serving in, and really love that. But part of that was my pastor that I was working for challenged me, and he said, hey, I need you to spend the next month, starting today, with get an hour alone with Jesus and do nothing else. Just an hour alone. And then by the end of this month, I want you to get up to 2 hours a day.
So wait, how old were you when you had this conversation? I mean, you're 21 now.
I was 19 at the time.
19 years old, 2 hours with God by the end of 60 days.
Yeah, 30 days.
30 days.
So,
okay, good. So he wasn't asking too much.
Yeah, that was a lot.
It feels, look, man, I'm a pastor with an MDiv. I don't spend 2 hours a day with Jesus, if I'm just honest about it.
No.
How'd you get there? Did you get there?
I did. And so that was actually when God called me and said, hey, I need you to go work for Carrie Newhoff. And I didn't have a connection there. But what I realized is, like, everyone thinks like, hey, I don't have enough time for anything. And what I realized is, as a college student, I had so much time that I wasn't maximizing. And especially now I'm a year and a half into the job with Carrie, and my time, like, I was wasting 90% of my time in college, and I thought that I was busy, and I was one of the busiest students there.
But like, what made you busy in college? What made you busy in college?
Old Chicago at 10 p.m. Like, not getting enough sleep. Because you always feel tired and you always feel stressed when you're not getting enough sleep.
Right.
So that, but when you live in the dorms too, or when you live with other people, conversations just happen, and sometimes those can take over your life. So one of the best things that I've done for my personal productivity is move to a place where I'm not surrounded by people all the time,
Sure.
even though I'm a massive extrovert, love people, love just processing life together. But I had to find the middle ground there. But anyways, so I did all of that. And so when I realized that I had more time than I thought, I started at an hour to loop back to the getting to 2 hours a day. I started with an hour and I just upped it by 2 minutes every day. So, and I would use my Apple Watch and just say, hey, set a timer for an hour and 4 minutes, an hour and 6 minutes, an hour and 8 minutes. And I wouldn't look at anything besides my Bible and some worship music on a playlist, but like during that hour.
So would you flip open the Bible and just start reading something? Were you using a reading plan? I mean, let's get kind of detail oriented here, because I think that there's somebody listening right now who's like, I can't even spend 10 minutes with God without getting distracted.
Yeah. So one, I turned on the music and I threw my phone. So like, I'm sorry, even today, I can't sit here without my phone just being in front of me. I got to check it. I got to, look at whatever, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. So I got rid of that. And then I had this journal that, the top line was Dear God, and then just blank lines afterwards. So I would start having a conversation and I'd just write whatever I was thinking and I would listen. And I didn't hear like an audible voice. I can't remember a specific time where I heard an audible voice, but it was like impressions that I was just like hearing and writing. And what I'd do is what I felt like God was saying, I'd write it down and then I'd really think about it, process it, look at scripture and say, is this something that God could be saying? And usually it was just like stuff in my personal life. Hey, I probably shouldn't be pursuing that girl because, Bible college. Or, hey, sorry.
No, that's perfect. Because every yes. Amen. Keep going.
Yeah. If you're married, that's always going to be the answer, unless it's your wife. But
right. Because Bible college.
Yeah, it was a rough time, man. But so this time, it was just conversations like that, and I have a journal entry from like January 12th of 2018 where I wrote, "This is crazy, but I think I'm supposed to go work for Carrie Newhoff." And I spent the next like few weeks asking God, there's no way, because I don't know the guy. I've met him once. He had been out to our college for a training day that we had him come out for. But I didn't keep in contact with him. So it'd been a year since I talked to him, and I'm like, God, what the heck are you doing? What does this mean? I'm crazy. I must be crazy. And then, so I wrestled with God about this for that few weeks of the time left of getting up to the 2 hours a day. And then I go and talk to one of the guys at our college, and he says, well, Frank Beeler is coming to town on Monday. So let's talk to him about it. Cause I know that they know each other at least. So maybe we talk to Frank about the idea. And little did either of us know that Frank Beeler is Carrie's best friend.
Right.
Yeah. Which is, God does some cool things sometimes. And this was one of them. But so when Frank came in, we had a class with him first. It was called Intro to Residency, which is like the working in the church is part of our school residency. So Frank came in and taught, and basically he sat there and I was in the front row, and he just kind of taught us for an hour and a half that you need to have a mentor that's at your level. So in a good way, but if you're here as an intern, you can probably learn from a staff member. And then if you're learning from a staff member, or if you are a staff member, you can learn from an executive staff member. So basically I felt like I was just like, oh my gosh, he was talking in response because he knew that Andy and I were going to have this conversation with him. Andy, the guy at our college, had mentioned to him that we were going to talk about this. So I thought the entire class was just him basically saying, there's no way this is going to happen. You are crazy. But we talked to Frank after the class. I'm sitting there just terrified because, this guy had been like one of the top guys at Elevation for years. And he was like about to shoot my dreams down. But
everybody loves to walk into those conversations where you feel like you're going to get slaughtered no matter what.
Yeah, and it's with somebody that, being a 3 on the Enneagram, I really care about public perception no matter what is going to happen. So
Right.
like I was just terrified, and it's to an unhealthy level. I get it. Us 3s were unhealthy in that. But so anyways, we have that conversation with Frank, and he's like, probably not. But I'll send a text for you, which is like, whoa, this is huge.
Yeah.
And he walked out of that meeting and shot Carrie a text and said, hey, I think I found your new executive assistant. Because Carrie had been looking for one, because his current assistant, well, she's current now again, but she was going on maternity leave in that summer, and she was going to be gone for a year because in Canada you get a year off, which is just outstanding for her. But in her absence, they hired me on. And
Sure.
man, like just watching God do that was crazy. And I look back and no one will ever convince me anything of like, yeah.
Now, I'd like to ask you a specific question. The day that you journaled that you were going to go, you think you're called to work for Carey Nieuwhof.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe the feeling of that call? Because that seems like a very specific call.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you could get more specific unless God gave you Carey's number.
Yeah. Yeah. So what he did is what I was kind of thinking about, I had a couple pastors that I had been working under for the last couple of years, and they were still in the city, and I didn't talk to them as often anymore because I had moved churches, good ways, but they just wanted me to work under a different leader because the leader I was under moved to Florida. So I moved to a church, but this leader keeps seeing me, and he kept calling out this gift that I have to ask good questions. And he said, hey man, like, you're going to do great things in ministry, but you got to keep asking these questions. Like these are good. I don't have leaders that ask this type of stuff. So what God was kind of showing me was like, I have this uncanny ability or gifting, I would say, to walk into a meeting prepared and just like get the best questions I can out of a leader and get the best answers I could out of a leader. And so I guess even more, the year before that, when Carey had been at our college, we had a coaching session with him where I asked a really good question. And it was like 6 students and Carey just sitting at a table, which is an awesome opportunity.
Yeah.
But I asked a really good question, and Carey walked into his next meeting, which my mentor happened to be in. And he said, I just got asked the best question I've been asked in 10 years. And it was by an 18-year-old kid. Which is like, whoa, but I just stolen the question from my mentor. He didn't say that in the meeting.
In the church world, we say glean. I gleaned it from him. Right.
Okay. I gleaned it from him. Yeah. But I literally walked into the meeting and said, hey, I got a meeting with Carey. What should I ask? And he sent me that question.
What was the question? What was the question? Do you remember?
Yeah. It was, so it was mid-conversation. So like I worked it in really well. But the gist of it was, okay, say I want to be leading a church or leading an organization in 10 years. What practical things do I need to be doing today to not only be doing that, but also be best personally prepared now, spiritually, emotionally, physically, whatever, to be doing that well in 10 years?
That is a good question. Well done.
It's really good. Yeah. Well, thank my mentor. His name's Corey Demmel. Shout out.
Thanks, Corey.
Guy.
Yeah.
But no, so I asked that question. Apparently it really stuck. I mean, and Carey had to have been asked that question before, but I think I just worded it in the right way. But God brought that memory of that conversation into my mind during that time in prayer where I wrote, I think I'm supposed to go work for Carey Nieuwhof, because God was kind of pointing out, hey, you've got this gift for asking questions. Maybe you need to go work for Carey. You can maybe write the questions for the podcast or something like that was the thought. And that's why I wrote it down. So that whole story is the long answer to what was going through my head when I
love it. You know what I appreciate is that I find that God always comes at us in different avenues. Yeah. And so it wasn't just your mentor at your Bible college, but it was also your pastor mentor during your residency. And then the opportunity. And I just think that when we see God in little things, God speaks to us in big ways.
Yeah.
So you begin to start down this path as an executive assistant, but that's not what you're doing now.
Mm-mm.
And I'm guessing that you didn't go to Bible college to be on staff at a parachurch organization. I don't know if it's fair to call New Life Communications parachurch, but you guys are for the church, right? So you guys kind of work for the church and you work for local church leaders. So how did you end up where you are now? And how did you end up with your call being a temporary delayed, shelved, or changed? I'm not sure what the right word is.
Yeah. So I'm not an executive assistant. If you've looked at Les McEwen's leadership success signs or whatever.
Predictable success.
Yeah. I'm definitely on the visionary side. I'm not the operator or the processor.
Mm-hmm.
So which a great executive assistant would be a operator with a little bit of processor and almost no visionary. I am the opposite. So it was a tough year. Like I had to learn and grow a ton. But it was good because those lessons that I learned translate to all areas of ministry and life and work, really, where it's, did you do what you say you were going to do when you said you were going to do it? So that you've probably heard Carrie say that, but simple skills like that. It was just a year of me really learning how to do that.
So can I ask you a very kind of practical question here? Did it feel like you were getting beat over the head every day? I mean, was it hard like that? Because my experience is if you put me in a budget meeting, my eyes glaze over, things start to slow down, and a 15-minute meeting feels like it lasted for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yes. It was really hard.
How did you survive it?
Mentors and the network. One thing that I like to say is that I wasn't enough. I didn't survive it, but the people that I had put around myself, my mentors, my pastors, the people that I could reach out to in hard times, they helped me survive through it. And
did your boss know that you hated it?
I wouldn't say hated.
It was a grind. You know what I mean? There's a difference when you're living in your calling versus when you're you're grinding. A year is a long time to grind.
Oh yeah. So yes, he did. And this is very closely entwined with my my blog post, 3 things every young leader needs to hear from their boss.
It's so good. We'll link to it in the show notes. I read it. I thought it was so good.
Yeah. But so he said a few things throughout the year that were just so helpful because he did know you're not an EA. You're not an executive assistant, but this position is only for a year. And afterwards, we'll see how it goes. So I'm very lucky to still have, or very grateful to still have a job.
Well, and in your blog post, I thought you said it beautifully that if you know your why, if you know why you're doing it, you can survive almost anything for a year. So did your why change to content manager? Did it from pastoral, a pastoral calling, or was this, tell me about that.
Yeah. So, I was in a degree called, just a bachelor's in pastoral ministry. And I have a huge passion for the church, huge passion for, obviously the message of Jesus.
And you can preach. I've listened to your message. You can preach really well. You're an incredibly gifted speaker.
Thank you. That's very kind. That was definitely one of my better messages, but God has been good with providing that gifting. But my passion for the church, it's weird, but even in high school, while I was an intern at a church, before college, before anything, I had this passion for the Big C church. And I had this passion for how do we change the public perception of the church from how bad it is right now, and how do we get it so that people are more willing and open to receive the message of Jesus on a massive scale. So, and there's a few stories in there, but so that passion never went away in high school or in college. So God had always kind of had some part of my, I could put on my bio as like I was the Omaha concert chaplain, where I was like, it was Big C church focused. And so that carried over into working for Carrie, because I don't know if I can point to a leader who is like as focused on just helping church leaders as some of our content is. And obviously there's tons of people, Craig Rochelle, Bob Goff, Christine Kane, all those people are killing it. But I had never met any of them.
Right. God didn't put any of those people in your path.
Exactly. But like, man, we're like Carrie's platform. I don't know if you know Caleb Kaltenbeck or not. Awesome guy.
In California, right? Is he in California?
Yeah, he wrote a book. Yeah. He wrote a book called Messy Grace. But he pointed this out to me actually last week. He was in town. But I was kind of wrestling with, okay, I have this passion for the Big C church, and personally for church unity is a big like passion point of mine. Like, I think we need to be working together, and I think Jesus prayed for us to work together.
Man, I wish you would say some things to the Methodist denomination. We're a Methodist church, and we need you. Anyway, keep going. Don't let it get distracted by.
Yeah. So Caleb pointed out that what Carrie is doing is already part of that unifying process, because we have Catholic, James Mallon is a guy who Carrie is close with. And so like we've worked with Catholic churches, we've worked with Protestant, Lutheran, Methodist, all across the board, the charismatic denominations, or I guess a lot of them aren't a denomination, but you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, I'm seeing this work, and I was serving that big why of what we were doing, even though I really wasn't gifted to book a calendar event for Carrie and, make sure the Zoom link is right and set up the podcast. So the big why, the big vision why was able to overrule the everyday, why am I doing this? Why do I have to, whatever. So that's probably one of the ways that I survived, was that. Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, did you see that your call became more refined to the big church? Or did you, I guess, how'd you know there was going to be something on the other side?
Other side of working for Carrie, or just
on the other side of the year of like, because it was kind of like you stepped into the big why, and then it wasn't, it was a grind, it was great, I'm sure, in a lot of ways, but it was probably really hard in other ways. And
so one thing Carrie did really well was he always pointed out that he knew I wasn't in my sweet spot. And he mentioned like multiple times, like once he knew that he was going to keep me after the year if he could, which there was a bit of a rough period where that was a question mark, where I had so much to learn. But he long-term really started to point out, hey, I want to get you in your sweet spot more. And he would say that. And when I heard that was enough to keep going. And did you know what your sweet spot was? I knew that I love to preach. So we have this speaking team that on our website, carrienewoff.com/speaking/my name would be my page. But we have the speaking team, and we actually started talking about building that 6 months before it went live.
Sure.
So that was one big thing, like specifically that we started doing, and like gave me a lot of hope, because I knew like just to be on the speaking team is a massive honor in and of itself.
There's some big names on that team.
Yeah. I don't know how mine ended up there, other than it just
God's grace, man. It's all good. You're good at what you do. Don't let anybody tell you anything different.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Thank you. But yeah, so that just that kept me through. That kept me going, and that was just it was fun. It was hard. It was this is also something I pulled from Corey, but it was the hardest but best job I've ever had, and I think everyone needs to go through that. I think we all need this. You got to go through the fire for a little bit, and yeah, I think that's something that more people my age need to do, actually.
I definitely see that benefit, and it reminds me of, what Paul says, rejoice to the extent for which you can suffer for Christ. I think that rings true for so many of us, that on the other side of the hard things is a bigger picture than what we can understand, because as I often at times have to remind myself, I'm not God. Yeah. That controlling side of me just wants to take things over. So you're on the other side of it now, and you're serving lots of leaders. You're speaking at lots of different places. You're writing blog posts that are going out to thousands and thousands of leaders. How do you stay connected to God now that you're not in your Bible college anymore, right? And you're doing big time stuff with big names in Christian circles.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not easy. Just as a bit of an encouragement to everyone out there, man, it's not easy. I think when things got really hard in the job, my natural tendency was to just work more hours, which was dangerous, I think. But I went until the job was done. And as you know, the job is never done. So I just went and went. And eventually I had to learn, like, oh, this is extremely unhealthy. And like, I had some hard times in there. But what I've learned now, and this is especially thanks to Craig Rochelle did a series called Habits at the beginning of the year at his church, based on it was James Clear's Atomic Habits. Phenomenal book. I think I've read it 3 times this year. But so what I've done is now I have this morning routine that I try to hit every day. Don't do it every day. But I'm definitely hitting it more often than I'm not, of wake up, get the coffee, and just get in the Word right away. And whether that's like audio playing, I've got a chronological year-long reading plan that I'm working through. But I got to start there. And I usually try to start with worship music. I think that's one of the biggest missed messages that the church is not saying right now, at least Christian leaders aren't saying, is how important what we listen to is for like how our life is formed. You notice it in yourself, where like if I go 3 weeks of listening to my personal, like, I grew up small town Nebraska, so I like country music. Some people are probably going to swipe off the podcast right now.
No, I love country music. It's fine.
Okay, that's good. But if I go and listen to, the best beach country music playlist for 3 weeks straight, I just want to escape. I want to go. And I think more than we give credit, music forms how we think. So an intentionality on what music I'm listening to, especially to start the day, is huge. And I know a lot of our team members are the same way, where we got to start with worship. So that's big. I've noticed that going to church is actually like, and not only just showing up and sitting in the seat, but like going to church and really listening and saying, okay, God, you've got something to teach me today. That's becoming more and more of a spiritual discipline too. Like, do you think it's hard
in the world that you live in? You're surrounded by some of the world's best communicators who are preaching incredible messages. Mm-hmm. Is it hard for you, as somebody who's dialed into that community, to get up and go to a local church on Sunday morning in the middle of Nebraska, where, let's be honest, some of the communicators may not be at the same level of the
Mhm.
people that you're listening to in your day job.
Yeah. It's definitely, there's a tension there. Carrie, his church, they listen to Andy Stanley every other week.
Sure.
So it's like, that's the best of the best. And I think my brain naturally works more towards that style of sermon, listening, just the highly practical, work through, get one life concept and get out. I enjoy that. That's how my brain is actually wired. The church I actually attend here in Omaha, it's called Mission Church, but it's it's a church plant that's 2 years old, a few hundred people. And, it's very, very charismatic, and it's inner city. So, inner city, sermons and everything, there's not that line that you can draw through it normally. And that's also preaching style too, but
Of course.
It's definitely not what I naturally listen to or naturally hear, but what it takes is a little bit more humility, I think, of just going, hey, this is reaching our community and our city. So I'm really glad to be here. And even if it's not my style of preaching or whatever, it's still really good, and it's still the word of God, and it's still what I need to hear.
I think you bring up a great point too, because no matter how good Andy is, unless you're in Atlanta, your church is, you're not going to be able to show up on Sunday and then afterwards serve the people in your community. So you can listen to messages all day long, but actually living the message has got to be completely different.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say that I think the living part is a lot more important. One of the things we talked about before we recorded this podcast was kind of how to dance that balance of really trying to work a lot, and a church just feels like another thing sometimes. I think the biggest thing is that even if I am traveling 3 weeks out of a month and I'm not at church, sure, I'll try to watch it online if the online is working and whatever. But the message is still internalized for me. The vision, the mission, we're a church that's going to unleash unprecedented hope in every inner city around the world. It's a massive dream, but it's a part of me, and I own that. And so not only I go to Mission Church, but I'm a hope dealer. I go and I bring hope to the people that need it most. And that becoming a part of my internal who I am, that's been massive for, even when I can't show up to church, I can still be the church out in the community, not when it's just a scheduled event. So that's been huge for me, I think.
That's awesome. And do you think that that's part of your wiring too, that you have this need to go out and actually do something with the message?
I'm probably more prone to it than most people my age. I mean, especially with being a preacher, I know that the goal is application with the sermon. And I don't think that that's as apparent to everyone else. But the goal is life change when I walk out of this sermon. So how does God want to change my life with it? I think that I'm definitely more prone to that, which is a bit of a blind spot for me, because then the 21-year-old that has zero interest in church or the message, I can't relate to as well. But obviously you find other ways to relate, with whatever struggles we have.
One of the interesting things, as I really kind of dove into your bio a little bit, is that you, when you were 12 years old, you lost your dad. Yeah. And the way you kind of talk about it on your bio is that tragedy turned you kind of closer to the church, which feels very opposite than most people, especially young people who in the midst of tragedy oftentimes walk away from all of that. Can you tell us how all that kind of went down in whatever way you feel comfortable sharing? Yeah.
No, thank you for asking. I think that's a topic that a lot of people just kind of skip over. And I mean, including myself. So it's a good conversation to have because this is a massive thing that God has done. But so my dad passed away when I was 12. He was drunk driving and on a motorcycle and passed away on that, which is awful. But when he passed away, he was definitely a farmer. Like he had his own welding business. Like he was the man's man, you know?
Sure.
And I wasn't, I guess. So like I was growing up and, we loved being out on the farm, but like I enjoyed video games and stuff like that more, which as a 12-year-old kid, like, whatever.
Right.
Like, that's just a part of life. But when dad passed away, like I realized that there was a massive deficit between who he was and who he wanted me to become and who I was. So when I saw that gap, when I saw that difference, it was a little bit unhealthy how much I went to this, but I completely changed my mindset from I want to have fun to I need to be that person and I need to I have to learn all of these things from someone other than dad because dad's not here anymore. So
Wow.
what I did, it's awful to hear now, but
I don't know if I would say it's awful. It's, you know what? It feels like a really normal response for a 12-year-old boy that just lost his dad. So I think that's just, I think there's a lot of people out there that, that have that response, even in their 20s and 30s. Like I've got to, it's hindsight, of course, being what it is, to recognize the deficit is what a huge gift. Mm-hmm. And to see that was, that's not where you ended up. Obviously you're not there now. Yeah. So I think that's really good. And it's really wise of you to say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When I saw that deficit, when I really realized that I had a long ways to go and no one to show me how, I got this internal ability and drive to learn from older men that knew those things. Which it was unhealthy, I think, but it was really good. It ended up being super healthy because what God did is he brought in guy after guy who was, friends with my mom, friends with my dad, whatever that we had known. And they all taught me how to fix cars, taught me how to work on whatever. But they also said that you got to be good with the Lord first. And they pointed me towards Jesus and really it was because of that process and that internal tendency that I just dove headlong after Jesus. So that, and not only did I turn towards him, but I was in and I went for it.
You were all in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, and I think what happens, cause I'm writing a blog post on this actually right now. It's taken me a month to write, but it's a lot of internal processing. But I think when tragedy, like losing a father, steps into your life early, it turns into an extreme. It's either unhealthy or it's healthy. And luckily for me, it was healthy. And I just went extremely for good in the world and extremely for what I learned was the most good, which is the message of Jesus and the message of Christianity. So I turned it into that extreme, but so many people don't. And so that's the blog post I'm writing right now. And that's the kind of the subject on that. And
I think, it's the ultimate, Jesus is the ultimate coping skill when it comes to healthy or unhealthy, right? Because when all that sometimes emotions have the tyranny of the urgent because they feel so oppressive in the moment. And yet you got to do something. And I can't imagine being 13, 14, 15 years old as your body is changing. I'm raising a 13-year-old right now, and he's a hot mess. I love him. He's wonderful. He's a great kid, but he doesn't know what he's doing. It's insane. Yeah. But do you think, was it one church that kept supplying all those guys, or was it multiple churches or just multiple people? Or because I think there's probably people out there in their life right now who need somebody to walk alongside them in this journey of faith. How'd you find them?
So when I was really young, they definitely found me, I think. When you see a kid that's gone through what I had gone through and you realize that you have a chance to step in and help, you usually do, I think. Or at least these guys did. And they kind of leaned in and said, okay, I'm going to pour into this kid. And so in that way, they found me. But when I got to college, that responsibility, kind of like to have that male role model that I could look up to and follow and learn from, it became a school requirement, actually, because they said you have to have a mentor while you're here. And I mean, I would have done it anyways. That's just something I would have done. But what happened then is it was multiple different church leaders throughout college from different churches, from different walks, like different theological beliefs. I went from a traditional, relatively fundamental Baptist church, not traditional, but like traditional contemporary. So like they changed everything in 2001 and then didn't change again.
Man, they're
but I went from that church into an AG church.
Okay.
So like just a massive
AG,
shift.
Assemblies of God, right?
Yeah. So Pentecostal, hyper charismatic.
Like people falling on the floor, speaking in tongues.
Yeah. That was the first time I'd seen that. And that was,
That'll mess you up a little bit.
Yeah. Because the church I'd grown up in believed that all that stopped. And so what I had to decide is either that was wrong or all these people are faking this, or like it's, that something evil is happening. And I'm like, no, these are way too good of people. And they're serving like Jesus in better ways than the original church had it. I don't want to scale that, I guess, but they were doing so much good for the city. And, their relationship with Jesus was real and awesome. But anyways, so I learned from very different churches along the way. And I think that served me so well now being in the place that I am with Carrie, where like we're content for all people. Carrie is an ex-Presbyterian. So, if anybody moves in service, it's because they're having a heart attack, but, which is terrible to say.
No, it's so true. I grew up Catholic, so it was like, sits Danielle, don't break the line, like just stick with it. So I get it. Yeah. And so learning from all of those different perspectives added a lot of value, and I still do it. I still will regularly meet with church leaders from all kinds of different churches if I can. And it's really good. Some of those most valuable meetings, like especially as they've carried into my job with Carrie, have been some of the biggest lifesavers for me. Cause I'll come out of a week that I just screwed everything up and nothing's going right. And I'll talk to them. They'll say like one thing to fix and everything's good the next week. And it's that's awesome.
Well, you guys just have a lot of experience that I don't have. That God has kind of drew that long line of, it 10x'd my ability to lead and to grow and to develop. And, I'm not the average 21-year-old just now, especially in interests.
What a gift to come out of such a tragic event. A lot of your shaping, kind of a random question that I thought of as you were telling that story. Were you a 3 on the Enneagram before your father's death? Hindsight, obviously. You don't know, just a guess.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's okay not to know. I've been thinking a lot about how much our events shape our motives and how much our if it just, if it amped it up or if it, I don't know. I'm just, kind of curious if you were that kind of a producer prior to that moment, or did that moment was a catalytic event that forever changed you? And I could see both sides of the discussion.
Yeah. I've preached the sermon on dad passing away a few different times to a few different churches. And, one of the biggest things that stick with me from that message, the last time I preached it was a couple of years ago, but it's the opening line, and it's, my life started the day that my dad's ended. And like, obviously I'd been alive for 12 years before that, but I think my cognitive, like really thinking for myself started when he died. So I don't know if I had an Enneagram number before then. And maybe you have some counselor audience members who are going to like call me after this and be like, hey, you need to work through some stuff. But
don't we all?
yeah, that's true. No, we definitely do. But I don't know. I think I was a kid that wanted to have fun. And I hadn't had a perfect life before that by any means. Like my parents were divorced beforehand and everything.
Sure.
But that 3 definitely was, if it was already there, it just cranked up afterwards. So it definitely had a big impact on it.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. And my knowledge of the Enneagram is, it's minuscule compared to a lot of people, but it's always interesting to me if kind of where that all lands. And here you are now, some years later, and you're doing something that you couldn't have. I mean, there's no way you could draw that up in high school or in college. So one of the things that I saw on your Instagram is your tagline is "Comfort is not a goal worth chasing." Comfort is not a goal worth chasing. And so you wrote that, and you're now in what some people would say is a pretty sweet job, doing pretty amazing things with people that in Christian circles are considered to be, pretty well known. You could use the word famous if you wanted to. Where are you chasing discomfort right now?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
I think so working for Carrie, he's partially a product of North Point, and North Point has a really high feedback culture. And me being so if you read my blog post, so if you look at StrengthsFinder, my top 5 strengths are restorative, harmony, connectedness, belief, and includer.
Yeah.
So all 5 of those things are like, I just want to, get along.
We all just get along, right? Right.
Yes. And Carrie being an 8 like you, he's just very quick to call that stuff out. And for the first year, the first 6 months of working for him, I really didn't understand how he could just quickly dive into a problem, and I would feel personally attacked for it.
Right.
But that hasn't gotten any easier. I just know that that's how his brain works. And he sees a problem. He wants to call it out because he wants, 10 minutes from now, 10 weeks from now, 10 years from now, us to be thriving. And to do that, the fastest way there is to overcome this obstacle in front of us right now. But that's still not easy for me. So the high feedback, the always growing in that way, that's one way that I'm definitely still chasing discomfort. And that will never change as long as I work for Carrie or probably any growing organization or church. I don't think that'll change. So that's really good. I try not to let life get too easy. And if it does, I shake things up a little bit. I try to keep my calendar full in a healthy way.
Sure.
Carrie has a quote where those that know their capacity are the ones that run closest to it. So in that season of last year when I was just starting at Carrie, this is another thing that was awesome. But 2 months into working for Carrie, a couple balls had been dropped on an external end of our company for Carrie's book launch. So he looked at me and said, "Hey, I want you to run the launch internally."
Oh,
which, I was 19.
Sure. Right. And this is a big book launch. I was on the launch team. I was on the launch team.
Heck yeah. So I was put in charge of running that launch, and I was 19. So I quickly turned 20 afterwards. But there's not much difference there. But just looking at that kind of stuff, I learned in that intense season, my capacity and I learned where I had to say, I can't do any more than this.
Hmm.
So now I have a pretty good awareness of what I can and can't do. So I have to, like, one way I stay uncomfortable is I run close to my limit without exceeding it. So that's good. And some of that obviously is time with, I have a girlfriend now. Her name is Maggie. She's amazing.
Oh, you guys are cute on Instagram. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, thank you. I will tell her that she
I mean,
is
you
definitely
clearly outkicked your coverage.
I tried, so that's good.
I'm teasing. That's great. Okay. So, final question. I always love to ask people, that if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice. So, let's go. I don't want to go all the way back to your dad's death. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to the beginning of Bible college in Nebraska. You're getting ready to start, and you've got big visions of being the next Andy Stanley somewhere in the world. You know, you're starting out, and you know that God's called you to something like this. What's one piece of advice that you could give yourself now, 5-6 years later?
So, all of this, like working for Carrie, being the Omaha concert chaplain, all of that almost didn't happen. I can look back and I remember this clearly, as clear as day. This was my freshman year. We were going to go and volunteer at this concert, and it was a Newsboys concert. But I remember sitting in my dorm, and like it was just a thing. Last minute, everything's last minute at our school. But it was
In
last
college.
minute.
It's college.
Yeah, it's just part of it. But hey, they need 20 volunteers. Let's go. And that's how I ended up getting the Omaha concert chaplain job, where I was like ministering to Lauren Daigle and John Christ and all those guys. And like, so massive opportunity, but that all came out of this night. And this night, I was in my dorm, and I just remember just being hit by a wave of tired and just like, man, I don't want to go. Like, no, I'm not going to go. But then I remember just sitting there thinking to myself, yeah, but that's the lazy part of me. I need to go. That could have gone either way. So I think if I could go back to freshman year Dillon starting out, I would say that one of the enemy's weapons is laziness or tiredness, and he will use it on you. So just be ready for that, and always do, if you can, always do what the lazy part of your brain doesn't want you to do. And I think that ties into always taking the little opportunities, no matter how small they are, stewarding that. But I think that mindset would be what I'd tell myself if I had to go back. It just shocks me, because that one night, that was a huge part of getting the job with Carrie, was having that prior experience, and
Changed everything,
almost,
didn't it?
Yeah. And it almost didn't happen because I was tired. Like, come on.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful. Dillon, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, what a rich, deep soul that you have. And I love the fact that you're only in your early 20s, and I just can't wait to see what God is going to do in you and through you. And I know that my listeners will too. So where can they go to connect with you? How can they find you on the interwebs?
So if you're looking for just learning a little bit more about me, or like that speaking page that I talked about earlier would be a good one. So I think the easiest way to get there would be type in Carrie N in Google, and then go to his website, Carrie Newhoff. You guys will link to it in the show notes too, I'm sure. But
sure.
It's so you can find me there. If you have a podcast or a speaking event or whatever, you can fill out the form, and I'll respond to you back there. Otherwise, Instagram and Twitter, at Dillon_M_Smith. And so Instagram and Twitter, that's kind of where I live. And then Facebook too, Dillon Smith. Good luck finding me. If you go to Carrie Newhoff, I'm one of his team members. So
got it.
Yeah.
Good. Is there any way that our listeners can be praying for you?
I think being a 3, one of the big tendencies that I always have to fight is this tendency to make the success of my life and the story of my life on me, and it's not. So just added humility as I go forward. I think, God has had me on a rocket ride, and it's been so fun to watch, but like one of my biggest fears is letting that get to my head. So I just don't want that to happen. So if they could be praying for that, and then, I think that's good. My sister's on a world race right now, so if they want to pray for that, that'd be good too. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good. I got it. All right. So we will be praying for added humility and your sister's world race. I think those are beautiful things, and we'll continue to do that. Any final thoughts as we close up here?
I don't think there's a more life-changing force than having a good mentor in your life that you can ask any question to. Obviously the power of Jesus and all that, but like if you're a leader, if you're looking to like thrive in life, find yourself a good Christian mentor who's a couple steps ahead of you. I can't scream that message from the top of enough rooftops. Just look for that and find that if you can.
Amen. Thank you so much, man. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's podcast. Thank you for sharing and for telling your friends about what God is doing through the Reclamation Podcast. And thank you, Dillon, for such an incredible outpouring of wisdom and vulnerability. I loved the way that you talked about the men that stepped into your life and how we can be that for the next generation. Such an inspiring message that I know we all need to hear and share. Again, thank you for the opportunity, and I can't wait to see you guys real soon.